Hey everyone, welcome back to another issue of Partner Pairings from Practice by Numbers. I'm Rebecca Bolden, and today I'm joined by somebody who I've just had the pleasure of collaborating with through our partner community, Maritza Duran. She's the owner and the founder of MDent. And if you're familiar with MDent, you already know that they are an incredible company with an incredible reputation helping dentists really navigate anything from startups and acquisitions to operational systems, profitability, insurance strategy, team development. And what I really appreciate about the MDent approach is that it's never just about, opening a practice or fixing one problem. It's about helping practices build a sustainable business, right? With the right systems, the right leadership, right visibility, right from the very beginning. So, Marissa, I am so excited to have you on with me today. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you, and I'm really excited to have this conversation. So, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we really dive in, because I have some good questions for you, I'd love for people to hear a little bit more about your background because you've worked with so many practices at various different stages of growth. You've seen, startups, growing practices, operational turnarounds, all of it. What originally pulled you into this side of dentistry?
So, I will start by saying this. I think we can all agree. I definitely believe every dentist graduates with a vision. Some of them are thinking of opening their first practice, others are just envisioning a multi-practice setup. Others want to acquire an established practice. Some want to stay and build a career out of dentistry, right? But
Yeah.
the thing that they all have in common is that they want to create opportunities for themselves, for their team, and having more freedom and fulfillment in life. And the challenge that I see across every dentist, no matter what their vision or dream is that dental school only teaches them clinical excellence, right? How to treat
Yeah.
the patients, but they don't necessarily teach them leadership and or how to financially develop the bridge the gap between clinical excellency and having financial fulfillment, right? And
Mhm.
so this is what actually motivated me to start and found MDent. My mission is simple, right? At MDent, our mission is your vision, our mission, right? Regardless
I
of whether
love that.
it's a startup
Yeah.
or an acquisition, or you just want to develop your team or grow your team and grow in your practice. So basically, through MDent, we help dentists turn the practice that they dreamed of in dental school into reality through the principles that I have found have helped me as a first time business owner myself. And I call them the five principles of success, which are vision, people, numbers, leadership, and systems. And our partnership with you, Practice by Numbers, is one that it's so crucial because the numbers is usually the ones that tell them the story, and everything is interconnected. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. As far as my background, going back before the founding of MDent, I started my career as a clinical dental assistant, and the dentist that I worked for had a vision of expanding and growing, and I became his unconscious partner, right? Employee owner partnership and unconscious alignment, I call that. And through my journey working with him, I helped him open 15 practices over the course of 18 years. So I started as a very entry level position, clinical dental assistant, worked my way up to front desk, office manager, regional manager, overseeing all of the locations. And a really big milestone in my career was when I had a dentist that was a young mom starting her, like dreaming of starting her own practice, approach me as we were both starting our families and tell me, Marissa, like, I would love to start my practice, but I'm afraid, I'm lost.
Mhm.
I'm afraid of making a mistake and not being a good mom or a good wife to my husband. I grew up in a dental office because my father was a dentist, but he made so many mistakes along the way, and I want to prevent that. And that's how MDent was born.
Oh, I love that. I love that story. And I think that fear of not knowing what they need to know about the business side. And you're absolutely right. Like the dentists leave dental school with that clinical focus, but the business piece of it's just so important. So I'm so glad that MDent was formed. And one thing I think that both MDent and Practice by Numbers align on really well is the idea that growth without having systems in place like eventually creates chaos.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, a lot of practices they might be producing more than ever, but they still feel overwhelmed operationally. So I know you work with practices, excuse me, who are growing quickly, especially those startups and early stage owners. What are some of the biggest operational breakdowns you tend to see once that practice starts scaling?
Yes, so it's really interesting because I see this all the time. Some, statistically speaking, startups, they say that it takes up to 2 years according to the like economic forum, and to my understanding or my experience, I see my startups in a position where they're able to be profitable within their first 6 months to a year. And so a lot of it has to do with most operational challenges are not necessarily like actually operational. There are what I call symptoms, right? Like we feel something and we just don't know how to pinpoint it. And I always go
Mm,
back when I'm looking at a practice that is growing fast, or that it's basically like experiencing an operational breakdown. It's that I always go back to evaluating those five principles that I just shared with you. And I always go back to, is the vision clear? And do we have the right people in place, right? Are they using numbers to guide the decisions aligned with the vision, having the right people in place? And is leadership and accountability being created along the way, right? Or are we slacking off, feeling that, hey, we're getting into this operational cycle that I always tell people when they're starting to do the to run operations. You're starting with a new patient and you're reconciling an account for another, and you're greeting a patient, and you are constantly, this is an ongoing cycle that never ends. And
yeah.
if you're not anchored into the vision, having the right people in place, using the numbers to guide your decisions, and having the leadership to maintain sort of like that consistency, and the systems which you mentioned earlier that are so crucial. Because if you, systems are basically something that predictively tell you how you are doing, and if something is working, you systemize it and you put it where you continue to do that.
Right.
Sometimes if something doesn't work, it means that you don't have the right system in place yet. So you have to have the leadership and humility as an owner to understand that we need to step back and analyze all of the five principles and develop the system. And once it works, continue to replicate and use it, because that is how you build the momentum with your team, the turnover, which is also a big problem. So I always say that the biggest, operational breakdown that I see is that they break the alignment between those core five principles. And and I always say that as the practice scales, it is often the break in the alignment that causes those, like challenges for the owner and for the team and the patients and everyone involved in the practice.
Right. Yeah, no, because doing something at a small scale, right? Like you might be okay with those extra steps or things not being as perfect from a system perspective, but those cracks really start to show as you start to
Yeah, so
scale.
so it's
Yeah.
basically like while growth is happening, we tend to undermine the systems, and we don't let the systems evolve as we're growing. Right? Like we basically come in and and we think that what helped us with a team of two or three individuals is going to be the same dynamics once we continue to grow,
Yeah.
right? And so it's almost uh, being aware that the efforts and the strategy that you had and the systems that you had when you had a smaller team and more time on your schedule to do certain things or to work on the business is not going to be the same as you grow and you scale. So the systems need to evolve as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. You know, you help those practices build those right operational foundation from the beginning. Because if you're trying to fix everything like after you've already set up systems, yes, there's always tweaking, but that can just be such a big challenge.
And this is
Uh,
where I always tell my clients, you need to have a conversation and start going back to look at your numbers, because the offices get busy and nobody's looking at the numbers, which is one of the core principles. And I think that this is where practice by numbers, and you guys do an amazing job, because it sort of like brings you back, and then from there you can start thinking and pinpointing who's responsible. Do I have the right people? Are we following and consistent with our vision? And what systems or leadership skills or training are going to be necessary in order for us to bridge the gap from where we are and where we need to be, right?
yeah, absolutely. And so when you are working with a newer practice owner, what are some of the systems or habits like you really try to establish early on?
So one of the things that I love, like, and I think we've discussed this before, and we have uh, different clients in different stages. So
Right.
for example, for my startup dentists, I am coming up to an office on Monday, and it's going to be my first orientation day with the team that was newly hired. And the dentist is concerned about like new patients, new staff, new office, and new owner, because working as an associate also requires different skill sets than
Right.
being an owner, right? And so one of the things that we do throughout the project with our clients is, I always tell them, this is your master's in business administration centralized. So everything that we do leading up to the start date has been documented, has been systemized, and has been driven by data and numbers, from the selection of the location to the market research to the competitive research to hiring the right people in alignment with the vision, because we've already determined all of that. So we are ready to launch the practice. Before we do that, we take everything and we have a proprietary break even analysis that we do, where we tell them, hey, this is how many patients, this is what your hourly overhead is going to look like before you open, based on all of the relationship that we're having with the vendors. So this is your hourly overhead. This is your compensation, which ideally we negotiate for our clients to make sure that they're being compensated properly, because again, that's another big thing in the offices, being compensated properly. And
Yeah.
so we help bridge all of those questions that a new dentist or a new owner does not have yet the time or the bandwidth or the awareness, the cognitive load to be able to keep track and have all of these systems in place prior to opening. It's just too much and too overwhelming, right? And a lot
Yeah.
of companies focus on the launch when it comes to the build out and the vendors. And while that is important, that is just one phase, that the construction is going to be forgotten, but the operational systems and foundation that you built for that startup is going to stay there all the time. So for me, it's giving them the clarity around the vision, because we've developed all of the systems prior to open. So when I come down to the office on Monday, we're going to have a conversation. We already know how many patients we need to see for each day that we're open in order for us to cover costs, and we can predictably know when we're going to be covering costs and break even and be profitable, all within the first 6 months of the office being open. So clarity and around the practice, or what they need to do, and reverse engineering that so that we can get there faster, is that first system for my startups. For my acquisition doctors, it is gathering all the information, all of the due diligence, everything that we have gathered from the sell, or like from the seller, to be able to restructure, understanding how are they positioning their fees, what is their current overhead, and where are there opportunities for us to reduce the cost of overhead and operations, and increase the equity, or the production, or reimbursement of the practice, and working with the team to ensure that. So those are the same framework, the same, like systems or principles apply. Do we have the right people? Are we using the right metrics? And in times where we have a lot of our acquisitions 3 months or 4 months into our startups being open, I want them to plug in all the information and start using the trends and the KPIs through practice by numbers. But once we are working with a practice acquisition, the first thing that I want them to do is to have the snapshot and be able to have an overview of everything that is happening in the practice so we can make informed decisions. So the numbers is really, really important for us to build. So we basically create systems that are going to allow the practice to deliver like consistent patient experience, because ultimately without patients you don't have a business, right? And developing those early habits and making sure that they're well established makes it easier as as we're growing, or as we are projecting to grow. It just makes it less overwhelming to have all of that chaos that a lot of offices experience because they just didn't develop the right habits and the right systems early on.
Yeah. No, wow. I absolutely love, what MDent does for those new acquisitions or for those startup practices, really establishing like the leadership piece of it and really diving into the numbers when it's right for them. Whether that be before they acquire that practice, so they have a good idea of what they're getting themselves into, or knowing what their goals are to hit daily from a production perspective so that they can be productive, so early on, compared to the national average. So I absolutely love that. And that's something that we talk a lot about at Practice by Numbers too, is that practices just can't improve what they can't see, what they're not tracking. And so how do you help practices shift from making those emotional decisions to making data driven decisions?
Well, I tell the owners because a lot of times, we feel like we have instinct and we have like a gut feeling about something or someone. I
Mhm.
always tell them go back and track the numbers because the numbers are the ones that tell the story. The numbers, like we get on a scale as an individual to figure out, okay, am I on the right, you know, weight, or what are some of the things that I need to do to get into my ideal? And every practice, every location is different. But we all have those goals and that and what is true to be able to create that profitability and what I and that culture for our team, which is also important for our patients and for our team. And so for us to not have that emotional decision making, right? Um, it's really paying attention to the numbers. I always like to also add to that when it comes to feeling that we're doing something the right way versus having a bad day at the office. You may have a
Mhm.
patient that is just the crown didn't turn out the way that it was supposed to the outcome for procedure, or you get your first negative review and it may not have to be with you. And so the emotion comes in because we're very much attached personally to what we are creating because we are the creator. Like dentists
Yeah.
are artists, and artists are very, very detail oriented. And the minimal things, you cannot imagine the times that I come to a practice for a grand opening and they're worried about how a light switch from the contractor was like a little bit tilted. They notice that. And
Yeah.
you go in and you look at the big picture, you look at the overall elegance of the office, everything, and you're just, the patients will never notice
Right.
that your contractor slightly misaligned a little bit on the outlet section of it. Like think about the big picture. And it's hard for us, like I am a small business owner, and
Yeah.
as dentists, we dentists for the most part are and we're very personally attached to everything that happens in the office, and it's hard for us to look from the outside. And so I always say find the evidence of the things that are helping you, um, and stay consistent with what those are. And the clarity with the numbers, I always say, because we have the KPIs, number of patients, percentage of collection, the number of reviews that we're getting on average. And he tells us, hey, what is the trend for the number of reviews that we have been getting over the last 6 months? That is, or those first 3 months or the first month. It's always going and making sure that you are improving on those numbers, right? But I always come back to the importance of having you as a partner, that the numbers tell the story, and having all of this, having the visuals of how you're doing, and not taking it personal, but creating a strategic plan to bridge the gap between where you are once you are looking at those numbers, be it whatever it is, um, versus where you want to be ideally moving forward, and working around with the team to ensure that everyone is in alignment and working on the training to basically fulfill and drive the vision forward.
Yeah.
So,
And so I'm curious, like, what are some of the metrics, like, because you work with all sorts of owners, right? But what are some metrics that owners think they understand, but they actually don't?
so some of the things that they're just basically benchmarks. I think that the
Yeah.
national average overhead is, I think 74% is the national average of overhead, right? And so when you understand that for every dollar that you make, 74 cents are going towards your expenses, understanding that your book of business or the services that you do, what drives some of those, like recurring patients or the book of services that you have, having the uh, a more expanded, like dynamics in the different departments within the practice, like your hygiene department, are they performing up to the national standards, which they say it's about 30 to 35%, right? So those are metrics that you, once you look at a number and establish practice, you see, hey, this office is performing. And I'll give you the perfect example. We were working with a client who was acquiring a practice, and we noticed that when we were doing the due diligence, the overhead was just very high. And we are not in a business that, once we know that we have amazing individuals, legacy employees, especially when we're acquiring, and is going to impact the attrition rate,
Yeah.
potentially, that we go in and we make drastic disruption, right? But I was going through a project with a doctor that acquired a practice, and the dental hygienist, when we had the meeting, and I'm a young, considerably consultant, right? A hygienist, in very seasoned individual with lots of experience, was started with the seller. In this case, the dentist retired, she stayed on board, very well cared by the community, and so on and so forth. But we identify that, number one, she was not covering her own salary. Like, we created like a P&L, or
Yeah.
like a break even, just for their salaries themselves, to see they're covering their department. And in terms of the department itself, the hygiene department, it was really underperforming, 18% or so. And what we discovered was, I don't have time to do, like perio maintenance or scaling. And the use of codes a lot of times were not necessarily there. So they were like, I think the term that is used is, I think it's called, I forgot the term. I apologize.
You're
I think
good.
something neglect, something that it's
Like
that has to
intentional
do with.
intentional neglect, right? Like,
So it's one of those things that, that the patient needs this, and yet you're using the excuse of the schedule, or your time, or your comfort level, or that the
mhm.
patients dictate whether they want it or not, or whether the insurance is going to pay for it or not, to make the clinical recommendation. And so I think it's supervised neglect.
Oh, yeah.
Supervised neglect, yes. So some offices do that. I'm not a clinician, and I don't intend on stepping in and boundaries and telling people how to do, but I go back to the numbers tell the story. And
Yeah.
so we looked at her numbers, and the overhead was so high because these are seasoned employees, and they grew with the owner, and the owner was in debt with the individual, created a career for them that they could not retire to. But you're coming in as the new owner. you need to bridge the gap because you are acquiring their overhead plus some from the loan, the new marketing that you need to invest into the business to bridge that gap from the underperformance to where you
Right.
want to take it, and your new vision, your new aspirations, and your clinical skills, the technology that you spend a lot of time in dental school to develop. And so all of these things create that friction. And really what separates a strong office from a struggling one is that they invest the time with working with companies like yourself to just say, hey, help me analyze all the data. And perhaps if you have a consultant that I can trust, if they don't have the time or the bandwidth, or someone within their business that has the time to have to oversee all of these things and create strategies on how to mitigate those changes, then hire the help to do so, because it's a lot for you to do on your own, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a, you know, I know that's a one-off that's a, one example that you gave me, but I think that example could probably resonate with a lot of new owners who are taking over established practices, right? You have an employee there who, is well liked, well received, has, you know, been with the been with that practice for a long time, has that rapport and that trust built with the patients, which means like you want to keep them around. You don't want that high attrition as coming in as a new owner, but at the same time, really taking a deep look into seeing like what they're recommending to the patient. Is it in that patient's best interest? And additional services or additional, all within the correct rights, but what additional services should you be recommending? And if you aren't recommending, why aren't you recommending it? And is it a matter of training, a matter of comfort, and then overcoming that? And so, yeah, I mean,
So it's developing the metrics for them, because I feel that these individuals, and it could be happening in an office that it's like a, like a 5-year old practice or 3-year old, and they may not be paying attention to, hey, how is my team and my department doing against the national average? And once you do that analysis, and get the report from you, then why is it happening? And if it is happening and you identify, then you develop, if you haven't done so yet, the metric around it. Hey, this is the national average or standard, and I want to help you, and tell me how can I support you into making sure that we get there. Or is it, what is it that it's happening? And this is how we approached it with this office, that we said, what is the constraint for you? Like, why aren't the patients are, the seller was doing it this way, or finding ways to support them. Because at the end of the day, if you want to retain your team, you have to also um, develop them, and your leadership, it shows through your ability to say, this is the vision, these are the metrics, these are the benchmarks, these are the KPIs. Let's work together towards improving this department. What do you need from me? Let's work around it, and then let's follow up and make sure that we have the accountability to see the progress, within a month or 90 days.
yeah, that accountability piece is so huge. And if you're only meeting, or only looking at those numbers once a month, right? Like your progress is going to be very slow from month to month. But if you can,
And effort.
put your eyes on something daily, discuss it weekly, really measure your progress on that particular metric, you just move along so much faster. So really good insight. I know you've worked with enough practices to know like what works and what absolutely doesn't, Maritza. And so if you could give one piece of advice to a dentist either opening up a startup or trying to scale their current practice, what would it be?
I would say never lose sight of your vision, because that is one of the things that happens to the best of us, right? Like the daily grind and struggle. So like, and I feel that most dentists don't necessarily struggle because of lack of talent. They struggle
Yeah.
because they become trapped in the working, in the practice that they build, instead of building the practice that they originally envisioned. So every major decision should basically be moving you closer to that vision. So it always goes back to those, five principles: clear vision, great people, reliable numbers that you can always track and measure. So those are the things, that help the strong leadership and effective systems for sure.
Awesome. Well, Maritza, like this was such a great conversation. I just love what you do to help owners better get a grasp on their vision and really make that come to life and continue to go back to that. And so, I mean, honestly, is one of the reasons why MDent's been such a strong partner within the Practice by Numbers community. So for anyone listening who wants to connect or wants to learn more about MDent services, what's the best place to find you?
The best way to find me is you can go to my website, mdentcs.com, and complete the form on there, so that we can hop on a call and talk about your vision and help you bridge that gap.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for tuning into another episode of Partner Pairings from Practice by Numbers. And we love spotlighting partners who are helping practices create healthier operations, stronger teams, and smarter growth strategies. We'll see you next time.